Time. And then I can't mute myself because I can't see this. There is what you call
it. Hey, thanks for tuning in to another segment of Incarceration to Incorporation, where we bring on individuals to talk about their transition back into society. Coming from a state incarceration or federal incarceration, we bring them on and talk to them about their transition back into society and give them resources and to talk about what's going on in their lives and just basically get them the information that they need to transition back into society. We got a good show today. We got some informative information to bring to the people. I'm gonna turn it over to Julius Campbell. We can go on for sure because we got a lot going on and I don't want nobody to miss anything. I'd like to thank you all for coming on. How each and every one of y'all doing today?
Hi, AB. Hey, Julius. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Nick. Nice meeting you again, Nick.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. I am again grateful for this opportunity. Anytime we get a chance to give a platform for returning citizens, and anytime we get a chance to change the narrative for returning citizens, I'm always glad to be on. As you see, we have our AB with us, Marie with us, and also we have a special guest, Mr. Nick Powell. He's the Director of Strategic Planning for the Department of Community Supervision. And what we're going to do tonight, we're going to play a TED Talk that Nick just did. And after we play this TED Talk, we are going to give you an opportunity to ask the questions, the pertinent, pointed questions that we, returning citizens, have been desiring to ask for a long time. Plus, we're getting an opportunity to see the mindset shift of Department of Community Supervision. So, Nick, I'm going to give you an opportunity. after we finish playing your video to introduce yourself, and then you can answer as many questions. So it's going to be off the cuff, and I know you can handle it, all right?
All right, thanks.
All right, let's go, Krista.
When we talk about people with criminal records, we like to talk about the mistakes they've made, the opportunities they've blown, or their unfortunate mindsets. I think it's time that we, people like me who work in the criminal justice field, as well as the community at large, turn that mirror on ourselves and took an honest, critical look at how we perceive and interact with justice-involved people. You see, we've made so many mistakes and missed out on so many opportunities because our mindsets were off, way off, and this has to change. The good news is that it's within all our power to bring about change right now by simply shifting our mindsets in 4 fundamental ways. And there's even better news. All of these changes align with values that we already hold dear as a society. These 4 urgently needed yet easily achievable mindset shifts have become clear to me throughout the course of my career, during which I've come to know well children and adults who were afraid to dream of a brighter future because of the restrictions and stigma associated with their criminal records. I've accompanied families struggling to cope with the incarceration of a loved one, advocated for people to receive treatment instead of jail or prison, published research on the unfortunate intersection between mental illness and our legal system. And at every step, as my experience and knowledge of the criminal justice field deepens, it becomes more and more evident to me that mindsets are not only at the heart of problems facing people in our legal system, but they're also at the heart of solutions to those problems. The first step in shifting our mindsets towards justice-involved people is to focus on cultivating relationships. This entails seeing people as fellow human beings with whom we can build sincere connections, not as anonymous elements of a system to be processed or controlled. I strongly believe that our humanity is defined by how we treat one another. So every interaction between 2 people presents an opportunity for us to separate ourselves from the mistakes of our past. Let me share one of the experiences that led me to this revelation. As a juvenile probation officer, I spent an entire afternoon arguing with the principal to not expel a kid for violating the dress code. He didn't have his shirt tucked in. See, I knew this kid because of his prior arrest. This principal and I went back and forth for hours. I'd explain how school is the most positive thing in the child's life. His parents were deceased, his home was a mess, his sister was his legal guardian, but she was working 2 jobs and just trying to figure out how to become an adult herself. Then the principal would emphasize the importance of rules and disciplines. So I'd go into how hanging out with other neighborhood kids without adult supervision is how he got in trouble in the first place. Then the principal explained how he couldn't make exceptions, how he had to be consistent or the system that he built would all fall apart. Eventually, this principal ended our verbal bout with one final blow. He said, "Mr. Powell, I'm afraid you can't see the forest for the trees." And then he was gone, hung up on me. For the longest time, I just sat in my office thinking. You see, this metaphor it didn't sit right with me. A forest only becomes lush when it's comprised of a bunch of healthy trees standing strong together. And even more important than that, a kid is not a tree. This was a misguided child with a big heart and a great personality. And I just knew that with the proper support, he was capable of great things. Instead, in an act of adolescent rebellion, he untucked his shirt, got kicked out of school, and was rearrested within a matter of days. By choosing to impose one-size-fits-all rules instead of cultivating a supportive relationship, we missed out on an opportunity to help a child and strengthen our community. Now that day, this principal told me that I couldn't see the forest for the trees. But let me tell you what I could see. More often than not, justice-involved people have received the worst society has to offer. They've grown up with street violence and underfunded schools. A disproportionate number are dealing with addiction, mental illness, and homelessness. People leaving prison are 10 times more likely to be homeless than the general population. As people, they deserve better, and it's our responsibility as a community to change that. Now, we all have fears and concerns beyond our control. Challenging conventional wisdom, however, is how we reach higher ground in our community responses to social issues. Now, don't get me wrong, this is going to take some courage. We're going to have to be courageous enough to believe that everyone, regardless of their background, is capable of reaching the peak of human potential. The second mindset shift involves taking the time and effort to understand a person's story and the context of their life now, as opposed to only considering their criminal record or current status in the eyes of the system. When it comes to society's interactions with justice-involved people and their families, empathy is often undervalued. But in my opinion, the ability to understand a person's situation and share their feelings is critical for bringing about social change, especially when you consider the boundless consequences of imprisonment. Families struggle to meet basic needs like food and healthcare when a providing member is incarcerated. For those leaving prison, poverty, not criminal tendencies, is the most reliable predictor of whether they'll go back to prison. And in many ways, our system is set up to make it even harder for returning citizens to escape poverty. Future generations of our communities are decimated by these effects. Children with incarcerated parents are more likely to be arrested, they're more prone to drug addiction, and tend to struggle in schools. And ultimately, they're 6 times more likely to become incarcerated themselves. In other words, our flawed mindsets have prompted us to build a system where the predictors of incarceration are in fact perpetuated by incarceration. Let me say that again. Our flawed mindsets have prompted us to build a system where the predictors of incarceration are in fact perpetuated by incarceration. After a few years working with youth as a juvenile officer, I transitioned to working with adults as a felony probation and parole officer. I'll never forget my first day. I showed up 30 minutes early and my new boss is already waiting on me. With little to no chit chat, he escorted me to my office, pointed to a file cabinet, and told me to have at it. So I started thumbing through the files, familiarize myself with who I was going to be working with. And after just a few minutes, I made a rattling discovery. About every 5th or 6th file belonged to a name I recognized. They were the kids on my juvenile caseload, all grown up at 17 years old. It was their brothers, their parents, their uncles, their neighbors, and even their mentors. This experience fundamentally changed how I view the world. In that moment, I realized that crime is not a simple matter of personal choices or character traits. There are much larger social forces at play in the individual story of a person's life. It's a series of events and circumstances that mold our decisions. Only by listening and understanding a person's story can we ever hope to make headway in breaking these cycles of perpetual marginalization. So instead of debating about how much time a person should be spent locked away, perhaps we should be asking ourselves, how much time are we willing to give to hear their story? The third mindset shift is about fostering success. We must tirelessly strive to foster the success of justice-involved people, rather than simply promote punishment in a spirit of vengeance. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, the worst economic crisis in U.S. history, millions of people's lives withered from unemployment, homelessness, and starvation. The desperation of this time is characterized by lines to soup kitchens that stretch across street after street in our communities, filled with people struggling to feed themselves and their families. But today, it's harder for a formerly incarcerated person to find a job than it was for the people standing in those lines. Now, you may suspect that this is from a lack of work experience, or maybe it's because of a deficiency in interview skills. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. The late Deva Pager, a Harvard professor renowned for her work on the intersection between our legal system and labor markets, described justice-involved people as being marked by their criminal histories. She found that people with criminal records received less than half the calls for interviews of equally qualified applicants without records. So it's no surprise that 3 out of 4 returning citizens say that it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to find work after release. And for those fortunate enough to find a job, they're paid on average 40% less than people working those same jobs without a record. A few years ago, I was contacted by a young man who was up for a promotion at his job with the local chicken plant. Full of excitement, he explained how the timing couldn't be better. He had a baby on the way and was looking for a larger place to live. He'd worked at this plant for a couple of years and had an impeccable performance record. The only catch was that his boss would not authorize the promotion as long as the young man was still on paper, which means that he was released from prison but still had 2 years left of a 5-year sentence. So I agreed to look into his case. After reviewing the statutes and checking our policies, I found that I could ask the court to close his case early. Then the young man would no longer be on felony probation and he'd be off paper. So I did just that, drafted a petition, submitted it to the judge, and lo and behold, his case was closed. I was so excited that I rode out to the chicken plant to deliver the good news in person. And before I could even make it home that evening, I got a call from the district attorney's office asking me to stop by the next day. So I obliged. Upon my arrival, I was immediately asked if I closed the young man's case early. Totally misreading the situation, I said, yeah, I did. He was up for a promotion, met all the requirements, so I petitioned the judge who closed his case. To say they didn't share in my excitement would be a laughable understatement. After hearing all this good news, the only response was when one person eloquently stated, but he's a bonehead. Not sure what to do with this information, I politely excused myself. And after this short but strange conversation, I found myself once again reflecting on the incredible opportunity we were missing. Someone advanced their career, got out from under the legal system, and was honoring their responsibilities as a parent. Isn't this a victory? One that should be celebrated to the fullest? Instead, the moment was clouded by disappointment from the district attorney's office, a social institution that has sworn an oath to faithfully and impartially serve our communities, which of course includes justice-involved people and their families. Former prisoners remain isolated by labels. I urge all of us to rethink what success looks like for these members of our communities. To do this, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want? Control or success? Retaliation or rehabilitation? Hope or vengeance? I had a chance to hear Georgia's Chief Justice, Harold Melton, speak at an event I was attending. He defined justice as the right response. I believe that in our efforts to formulate the right response, we have to figure out what success looks like for an individual in light of their particular circumstances. And then our mindset as a community should be framed around relentlessly fostering success for that situation. The fourth and final mindset shift I want to focus on is dignity. In cultures around the world, dignity is written in capital letters. In the US, however, we barely mention it, and it's virtually non-existent in criminal justice conversations. This is a glaring missed opportunity. Dignity means that a person is worthy of respect. These days, I head up our research division at the Georgia Department of Community Supervision. We work with people on felony, probation, and parole across the state. So I spend most of my time crunching numbers and writing reports. Very exciting stuff. Recently, my counterpart from another state reached out asking for some data pertaining to urinary drug screens. See, he was looking for some help in calculating the cost for obtaining just enough oral swabs so that female officers could drug test male clients. Not being able to resist myself, I asked him, have you considered only using oral swabs? He had no clue what I was talking about. So I took the liberty to point out that it's humiliating and degrading to make someone urinate on command right there in front of you to prove their sobriety. I went on to explain that this is an intentional, systematic, and totally unnecessary assault on a person's dignity. By choosing to do such things, we're putting people down instead of demonstrating that we value them and their successes. We could and should use oral swabs for everybody. Then we could enhance dignity rather than take it. After a few moments of awkward silence, he dismissed this notion as too expensive. But by refusing to entertain a new approach to an old problem, my colleague was literally putting a price on dignity. Okay, so you may think this examination of the steps we can take to safeguard dignity only applies to policymakers or practitioners, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is, this topic is important to everybody: teachers, parents, landlords, store clerks, fellow community members. We all have skin in the game when it comes to our ability to take care of one another. And the beautiful thing about what I'm proposing is that we can start right now, all of us. We don't need legislative movement or budget reallocation. We just simply commit to prioritizing the preservation of dignity. We make the deliberate choice to treat everyone with courtesy and respect at every exchange. At this point, we're missing so many opportunities to do this. Rather than defining someone by their crime or conviction, what if we recognized people as unique individuals with their own strengths, needs, and goals? What if we simply refer to someone as a person instead of using a negative label like felon, offender, convict, which only exacerbates the stigma associated with being involved in our justice system? What if we devoted as much attention to helping someone meet their basic needs as we do in limiting their access to resources like housing, transportation, and education? You see, our lives are full of these detrimental oversights. By making the conscientious effort to prioritize dignity, we're reshaping our mindsets to convert these types of missed opportunities into stronger communities. In closing, I'd like to ask a favor of you. TEDx has demonstrated a profound commitment for reimagining our world in a more positive light, providing a platform for cycle breakers to share big ideas. But here today, I'm asking you to take much more of a personal approach. Please re-examine your world for opportunities, no matter how small, to choose relationships over processes, to lend an ear toward understanding a person's story and their current situation, to strive for the success of those who've made mistakes, and to elevate the preservation of dignity to its rightful place in our relations to others. With these slight and intentional adjustments to our current mindsets, we stand to make monumental strides in creating safer, healthier, and happier places to live. Thank you.
First of all, congratulations again, Mr. Powell, on that awesome TED Talk. And I believe that it was important enough for us to come on and have a face-to-face dialogue, because some of the things were actually all of the things that you said were relevant and relatable and relational. That's one of the words that I like, the relational aspect, that we are now being viewed as people with dignity. So what I wanted to do was give you a platform tonight with my fellow brothers and sisters. And I want you to, you've already told us a little bit about who you are, but tell us the mindset of why you did it. And before you do that, we have our listeners on. Linda Scott said that was an amazing TED Talk. Miss Barbara Arfton, she says great information. And we also have some returning citizens that are on. Wade Valeria, which is Chief, Alvino Cooper, and Terrell Parks. And we have some others that are coming on. Leonard Smalls is watching as well. And one of the things that you also see, myself, Marie, and also AB, we are returning citizens. So we will be peppering you with questions and maybe some statements, but I wanted you to start off first by, again, just introducing yourself and telling us why you thought this was necessary.
Thanks, Julius. And again, hi, Marie. Hi, AB. I appreciate you guys having me on here. Like I said, my name is Nick Powell, and I work for the state with felony probation and parole. And this TED Talk was important to me because, plain and simple, I feel like we can still reach higher ground in our community responses to social issues. A lot of things get funneled into the criminal justice system that are much bigger than that. I feel like these are people issues that get entangled. And I think that with the correct mindsets, like not forgetting that we are community members with one another, that we are people, that we can make better choices moving forward. And that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of what drove me to this. So, and one of the reasons that I'm excited to be here is because I think that one of the ways we can do that is recognizing that not one of us have all the answers, right? Me and Marie were talking kind of informally before you came on, Julius, and she was like, "You've never been in a prison, have you?" And I'm like, "Oh God, no." But you don't know. I'm saying because I can't, but I'm not going to try to. I can't speak to that. But what I can do is I can engage in dialogue and learn from people who can. You know, like the example I gave in my TED talk about the drug screening. I mean, that was because someone brought it to my attention about how degrading they felt like it was. So like, you know, you're sitting here trying to build a relationship with me, telling me you got my back, but yet something so simple like that, you're going to exercise control over me. And our system's full of these kind of paradoxes, right? Where we're saying one thing and the video doesn't quite match the audio, and our actions support something else. So that's why I think it was just time to bring to attention some of the mindset shifts that we could bring. And I want to share one thing that that is a great example, I think, of why this conversation is so important to have. So after the TED Talk aired, my mother-in-law called me. You know, I just thought she was going to, you know, dote over me as mother-in-laws do. And she works in HR at a distribution center, at a warehouse. And she told me, "Thank you for the TED Talk. I have kept my mouth shut too long when people say stuff like, how do we get this person out of the running? Or how do we do that? Things that are just happening to where people see someone with a criminal record and then they don't want to look at him as a person." And she said it's gonna fundamentally change how she approaches her work, and make her speak up if she sees colleagues maybe not giving someone a chance, or maybe doing something unethical because they see someone has a record, because you know, this stuff happens. And I thought that was pretty cool, and that she would recognize that and be willing to speak to that. But I think unless we start working together to change these mindsets, working together to try to understand one another, we're going to just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Anyway, that's my 2 cents, Julius. Sorry.
Well, you're going to give a whole bunch more of your 2 cents. Marie, AB, I know you saw the TED Talk. Do you have any questions as I get ready to call out some of the listeners? They're having some questions, but do either of you have any questions?
I wanted to know, like, Nick, after you found out about your research, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to make it better? And how many people is on board with you?
These are good questions. I mean, one of the things that we have to make it better. That's the thing, is I can't do this. That's why I'm here. That's why, you know, me and Julius, we have a standing, we call it our 2-man think tank, where we're opening in dialogue and stuff like that. So there's nothing I can do to make it better. I just hope to be part of the solution.
Saying, like, part of the solution. Excuse me for cutting you off. You say part of the solution, but I was saying, like, I know you are the director, but I was wondering, like, how many of your colleagues are on board with this idea?
So, okay, yeah, that's a good thing. In theory, all of them.
Okay.
But it's translating this stuff into practice. Right. Mm-hmm. No one disagrees with me when I say we need to safeguard dignity, right?
Right.
But like with what you were sharing with me before the show, is that always the practice?
No.
Right. So that's why I think that bringing these mind shifts more to the forefront, and really examining all the little opportunities that we could be abandoning them, right? But like, no, I haven't had anybody come to me like, "Nick, you're full of it. We don't need dignity." No one thinks that.
Right.
But the actions are different.
Exactly. Right. Because you can say one thing and do another. And I like when you also said, that when you gave the illustration about when you was giving an example about the line, people standing in line doing the, what was that, the Great Depression or something?
Yep.
Okay. And so you said that is, and the line was from here to there. It was a long line, right? And you said it is 10 times likely, like when people are returning citizens, that they will be homeless. So why do probation and parole make it so hard for people that are returning home who don't have jobs and know that it's going to be hard to get a job? Why do they make it so hard? They want their fees and their fines.
Right. No, and that's one of the big things. And also too, it's that, that's where I mentioned that in many ways the system's set up to make it even harder for a returning citizen to escape poverty, right?
Right.
I mean, the system, you come out actually with a worse situation than you've been in. And a lot of social scientists are starting to even, really point out all the social consequences that stem from being incarcerated. So why do they? The emphasis on fees and fines.
Emphasis on fees and fines. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not certain. It seems counterintuitive, right?
Right. And I can't find a job, but you want your fees and your fines, and then if I don't pay you, then you say I'm going back to jail.
Yeah, I can't speak for every officer or every agency. I know our agency doesn't. You're not going to go back to jail for fines or fees.
Okay.
But that's our agency.
Right.
Yeah, but then Georgia's kind of weird though, because then you got misdemeanor, which has whole different rules.
Right.
And they may would send you to jail for fines and fees. So it's so there's totally different rules there. So I don't know. I mean, that's part of what the dialogue is, Marie. I'm not trying to skate around the question, but
that's okay.
I'm not sure what the answer is.
Nick, Linda Scott said, can you repeat your job position within your agency and what does your position entails?
Okay, thanks, Linda. My formal title is the Director of Strategic Planning and Research. So I write the strategic plan for the agency, which basically, details all our top initiatives to try to move us forward. And then I also oversee all our policy, grant, and data and research related projects.
So go ahead, AB.
I don't have a question, Nick. I guess what I want to know is, I'm concerned with, we all know, got a lot of answers. We got a lot of solutions. We got a lot of what we can do about this situation. We can talk about all the solutions, but my thing is, doing your research, right? Who are the people that this information need to be on their desk or in their office, where we breaking down the doors to get them to not understand it, but get them to move forward with everything that you said on that TED Talk, because that's 100% correct. Those are the things that we need to address to who are the people that we need to address those situations to, not sit back and talk about it, because we've been talking about it for years. And now that the justice system has now been exposed on a higher level now, because they're trying to do more and more for incarcerated individuals. They bring them home, trying to give them more, trying to reward them with this and that. So I want to know, who are the people that we need to address these issues to and knock down the walls and move forward. That's my concern.
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious, what do you think, AB?
Well, with the way society is now, I haven't done the extensive research that you have, and I need to look into all of that research that you have done, and we can come together collectively. And that's what this platform is all about, getting all the resources that we need to address it, who to address it to, and who we need to knock down the doors and the walls to get it in front of the people that can push these new policies. It's about new policies. It's about what we can do to bring forward new policies, and who are the individuals, who are the organizations that we need to address.
Yeah. I mean, just
because we doing too.
Dialoguing back and forth with you. I mean, my response to that, AB, is everybody, because it's like, a lot of people got good intentions. I think you said it in a more polite way than that, but a lot of people got good intentions, but then when they get hit in the face with bureaucracy, it becomes about, to steal a phrase from Julius, it becomes about politics and not people, right?
Right.
And that's what, and that's why I think that, more changing the narrative around what working together looks like, I think is really important. I think that having a better understanding of the different vantage points, like as far as like, people like yourselves who have actually been through the system and can call someone like me out who's a bookworm. You can call me out when what I'm reading doesn't match up with how things go in real life, right? But I think the important thing is that we have to embrace these mindsets as a community, and we have to avoid the pitfalls of finding excuses to other people, right? So it's like if we believe that we all should be lifting each other up, you should help your community member find a job, or you should help them find food, shelter, or whatever it is. You wouldn't just leave them on the dry, but then all of a sudden, they've got some kind of, you put some kind of label on them, and all of a sudden that stuff goes out the window, right? It has this othering effect. You've seen it with everything from, whether it's a criminal record or gang affiliation, or what part of the city someone lives in. People will use these as reasons to other somebody, and then all of a sudden these things that we care about, like dignity and stuff, go out the window. But another thing through the research, though, you were asking about, AB, is that Patricia Fernandez Kelly did a research in Baltimore, and she looked at people who work in the communities. She looked at like social service workers, probation officers, mental health workers, and found that like a lot of them go into the field with good intentions. But then when you got the bureaucracy coming down from the higher ups, they don't have the resources they need. And then they operate as what she termed liminal institutions, where it's only like a watered down version of what the service is intended to do for the community, right? Like the theory of probation and parole may sound really good. Like someone's getting out of prison, or someone avoids prison and gets probation instead. And this is somebody who should be working with you and helping you, never go back to prison, or never go to prison if you haven't. However, a lot of times people are overworked, spread too thin, and they can't actually stick to that vision.
Nick, let me interrupt you for a moment, because I actually like both the way you and the way AB are trying to answer this question, because I like the way when he asked it, you gave it back to him and said, well, what do you think? Well, I want to say it in this perspective. Community is ignorant of the complexity of corrections. What I mean by that is there are so many different layers. They have the victim's impact. They got the parole board. They got the Department of Community Supervision. So there are so many different layers. And I think the ignorance of our community, we don't know who to talk to or where to go. For example, I've heard many parents say, my son is going through thus and so, who do I call? And then sometimes they will call the counselor. The counselor would then tell them, call the parole board. The parole board would then say, that's not our hand, call the warden. So there are different layers that we need to peel back. So what I want, if you can, help us community, those of us that are ignorant, to know that there are different layers. And if we wanted to, A, address an issue, B, get more knowledge or understanding about a certain policy or a law, what would be the direction that we go in? Because you are the director of strategic planning. You help format, as the think tank, format operations. But who would we talk to? Or do you know? That's one point. And then the other point for you, community, who would you talk to about us doing some things, whether it be a chaplain or a pastor or the church leaders or community leaders? So that's what I'm asking you to answer that question right there from AB's perspective, but also from, which is community, but also from corrections. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, I don't know of I mean, there's not like a one source for like, we'll keep picking on you, AB. There's not like one source for AB to call and get this answer. You know what I mean? So like, I mean, if he's got a prison question, he'd have to call corrections. If he's got a probation parole corrections question, he would have to call, you know, someone like me or someone from our organization. If he's got a parole decision, he'd have to call someone from the boards of pardons and parole. Like there is a lot of separate entities, and there's not one place. And maybe that's a great example, Julius, of something that we could do better as a community, of maybe potentially establishing something to where, you know, the community has one-stop source for that kind of information. I don't know, almost like a hub or something. And then for me, I don't have anything. That's why I'm, you know, trying to learn all I can from you, Julius, building the relationships I can so that I can engage in this dialogue so that I can learn of what the reality is going on and what the challenges people are facing when they're being put on probation or parole.
Gotcha. And let me read a comment from one of our listeners, Mr. John Theo Harris. He says, this is a statement actually, what needs to happen is the economic drivers, incentives that are tied to the criminal reentry programs, that are tied to the criminal justice system, stages need to be reformed and repurposed. He says that, and this is a long comment, he says, diverted towards, hold up, let me get that back. I think what Mr. Theo Harris is saying is that everything needs to be reformed. That's one aspect. Everything needs to be reformed. But I got it back. I'm reading it now. All stages need to be reformed and repurposed, diverted towards preventive programs and reentry programs that lead to actual pathways of opportunity. So again, a lot of these things need to change so it actually leads to some programs that work. And that works for returning citizens and not just for people who getting paid. But we're going to connect you with a couple of people, Nick. I got some people that want your information so that they can talk to you about what you just said. You don't know who to connect with. Well, there are reentry organizations, nonprofits. There are community activists. There are community supervisors. There are many people that I believe once they hear that you first have been I hope this is not a bad word, the poster boy, if you will, for the changing of the mindset of community supervision, then I believe there will be people that will reach out to say, okay, somebody is finally listening. What do you think, Marie?
I think that you're right, Julius. I think that if Nick is what you call the word strategically,
right?
Strategically. If you write, Nick, what I want to say is, if you write it, that means you do all the planning and what should go on when you're on probation and parole, right? Or what should happen.
Well, no, all that stuff's kind of already set, but we're still have to operate in the law. So all that stuff's kind of already set. But I'll give you an example, Marie. So it used to be just about like one of the things that in our strategic plan, it used to be just about like if someone was on probation or parole, like you had to see them so often, right? Like you had to, we called them contacts. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but like that's how an officer's job was done. Like you had to go see this person this many times in a certain amount of period, whatever. Well, we've changed it now, where like now we're gauging an officer's performance, and this actually gets to Keith Richardson's question too about like if you decrease an officer's caseload size, what does better supervision look like? Mm-hmm. Now we're changing it where it's like it's not about just making contacts or going to see somebody. That doesn't help anybody. That's just surveillance, right? Right. What does surveillance do for you, Marie? Right. But what it is that if someone has a need, like a mental health need, a substance abuse need, an employment need, our officers are expected to try to help them, link them to a resource. And so talking about the strategic plan, that's what we've built in there. And that's a way, because that kind of circles back to what you kind of asked me earlier, like what am I trying to do? Like, it's a
Right.
paradigm shift. It is a paradigm shift. But what we're trying to do is, like, okay, we get caseloads down. We give you more time to spend with a person on probation or parole. Now you should be helping them more, right? So if
Right.
when we're talking about helping their job, that might mean helping them get their license, right? I mean, because
Right.
that stuff, people underestimate how difficult that is. And no, I haven't been in prison, but I can speak to how difficult that is. I literally was talking with a person one day. I was trying to help them get their license, right? Called the license place. They're like, they got to get the Social Security card. Then I call the Social Security place. They got to get their license. And I'm going back and forth, and they're telling me that you got to have the other one. And I'm like, okay, well, then what do we do?
Right.
And finally, I figured out that we should go to the Department of Health and get their birth certificate and go from there.
Right.
Now, that's information I can use to help the next person.
Right.
So we're kind of redefining what success looks like for an officer, instead of just going out and making contacts with these people or seeing these people and maybe engaging in some good rapport building conversations, but actually, if they have a need, you're expected to help them with it.
Well, that's really good.
And you know what, Marie, let me interject, because one of the guys, one of the returning citizens, asked me this question often about the relationship between and Nick, you stated that at the beginning. I think mindset number one, you stated that, but one of the returning citizen young men, she said, listen, we feel conflict, if you will, tension between the two, the Department of Community Supervision, which is probations and parole, and then returning citizens. And I like what you said about, I believe it was mindset number 4, which was dignity, allowing us to be human. Nick, I want you to speak, just briefly to that relationship aspect. Has that been received in your community or the peers, if you will? Because, and the reason why I asked that, let me give you an understanding. There are many returning citizens who would love to dialogue like we are dialoguing with you, but there is a level of intimidation. There is a level of fear that if I say the wrong thing, then there will be retaliation. And I think that was one of the words you used, relationship versus retaliation. So I have 2 questions. Number one, has this mindset of relationship between, of course I know it's professional, relationship between probation and parole and returning citizen been received in your camp, number one? And number 2, do you and others recognize the reality of that conflict or fear as it relates to returning citizens?
Yeah. So that's a really good point. So, and helping AB with some more research here, like more and more research is coming out that shows, like, and this is crazy, right? Seems like common sense, but research is showing that, like, if an officer demonstrates more empathy, right, connects more with the person on probation or parole, helps to understand the problems, is better equipped to recognize problems in others, then it ends up being better outcomes for the person on probation and parole. So it's like that relationship itself can actually increase a person's likelihood of being successful. But in common sense wise, it makes sense, right? Like, you're going to do better if you got someone supporting you than you feel like you got someone just waiting to drop the hammer on you, right? So the relation, you know what I mean? But we still have a long way to go. If it was perfect, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We've got to lift higher ground. So, like, in my camp, like, I mean, theoretically, yeah, like, I mean, my professional circles, like, yeah, everybody agrees in that. And then the thing that is a big hurdle and a big challenge, Julius, is that power imbalance that you're describing, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you're cool with me, you're trying to build rapport with me, you're asking me about my family, but at the end of the day, you can send me to jail or make me pee in a cup. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? And that's why I think that the importance of mindset shifts, of thinking about not just the immediate effects of what you're doing and saying, but the ripple effects, right? You go into somebody's home and you start fussing at them about paying their fee in front of their kid. And that's humiliating.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? You can't ever drop the human decency aspect, is what I think. And that's what we have to keep striving to do better. And I think one of the best ways to do it, though, is by having dialogue like this, because it keeps it humanized.
Nick, Linda Scott says, how can the community collaborate with your agency to create programs to cultivate the mindset change within the community? And the DOC could collaborate with resources that could cultivate and foster success.
Well, I mean, Ms. Scott can reach out to me or Julius. I mean, we're working on a project outside of this right now where we're trying to come up with a model for that, and then and then figure out like how it would work, and then how we would scale it statewide. So like if she's got good ideas, like I would ask Linda to please reach out to me or Julius, and let's share those ideas.
I think she will be a wonderful person to give you some ideas. I know Linda, so I think she'll do an awesome job.
Fantastic.
All right, I have a question. A statement. John Theodore Harris is doing his doctorate on the economics of incarceration. So when I read these big old statements, he's doing his dissertation. So that's just to preface this statement. But he says people who desire reform need to start at the genesis of incarceration. With this mindset, every time handcuffs are placed on a person, a system has failed. Now, I was looking at, I think it was a couple of months ago, Germany, if I'm not mistaken, and the way Germany does incarceration. And I think that was a little bit to what Mr. Theo Harris's statement speaks about. Do you have any comments on that, Nick?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I think it's a profound way to look at it. I mean, and I think that I think he touches on something, and I'm curious to see his work in the future as he's doing his doctoral studies. But I think he's touching on something big there, and that's the fact that like we can never normalize something as big of a deal as putting handcuffs on somebody, right? I mean, you're taking that's not something that should be done lightly, and I think that's something too when you're talking about these mindset shifts. You're keeping dignity in the forefront, stuff like that. It's like asking yourself, is that really necessary for all of us to be safe? Or is it about control? And I think that's what we get to the situation of like, what do we want here, right? Is this about egos? Is this about control? Is this about or just about trying to build stronger communities? And I think if you're keeping that in the forefront, then hopefully we can make better decisions moving forward.
I think one phrase that I used to hear the reentry world say, that reentry doesn't begin after incarceration. It starts at incarceration. And so what you and Mr. Theo Harris is saying makes sense. We have to change the way we think about incarceration, period. But AB, do you have anything you want to share?
No, we have someone just tapped in. I can't see it. It just flashed off. But if you can go back and get it in. Barbara, what's the Arston?
Often, yes.
She said if oral swabs give the same information as urine, why is the urine being used for screening? And the urine collection is more time consuming and etc. Not to mention the dignity aspect. Can you talk about that, Nick? Can you respond?
Well,
to that?
when I proposed that to my the colleague that I talked about in the story, that the money aspect, oral swabs are more expensive than drug screens. So that's why I said when my colleague shot down my my thoughts, they were literally putting a price on dignity. Mm-hmm. So money was the reason he gave me, just to be straight with you.
It seems like money is the reason for all of this. It's the money aspect.
Yes.
It's the money aspect. It's the system. It's what works for them when it comes to those mass incarceration and funding and all of that. So we're talking about a bigger scale here when we're talking about the money aspect of it,
And I think too, AB, that's just straight up. There is money in incarceration. But as we get ready to come to a close, Nick, first of all, thank you for, just being real and changing radically the mindset of criminal justice. But you have a couple of minutes. What would you say? And then Marie and AB, if you have a final note to add as well, please feel free. But Nick, what would you say? You have two audiences. Number one, what would you say to the audience that of returning citizens? How would you make them feel confident that there is a shift, a paradigm shift, if you will, and help them to be encouraged by that shift?
And you said two audience, and I guess
the audience is your people. And I hate to say it that way, but the department.
I got you.
Okay, how would you stir them in the direction where you are headed?
Well, for the audience of people who have been incarcerated, I would say to what you three are doing right here and everybody else who's joined us. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, speak your truth, share your story, engage in the dialogue, and then it's up to us, other members of the community, your fellow community members, to listen. And so like I appreciate what you guys are doing. Julius, I learn so much from you all the time, but just to keep telling your story and raising these real issues and keeping them on people's minds, making people aware of them. You can't start solving problems until you identify them, right? True. And then for the people that I work with, and on the other side, my people is Julius. It's don't forget like why you got in this work. Like most people get into the work because they want to help their communities, they want to help their fellow people, but somewhere along the way it's easy to lose that. So if that's what you're in, then think about every decision and think about those ripple effects, right? And like just sum it up. If you're making the decision because of money to not do an oral swab instead of a urine swab, but yet you're getting frustrated because you can't get over that power imbalance and build that good relationship, maybe you should start thinking about how everything's affecting each other, right? So I just know because that's one of the topics that came up. So that's what I would say. Just remember why you got into this, and remember like who your fellow community members are. Great,
Marie.
I just like to say thank you, Nick, for coming on and giving us the information that you have given us. I really appreciate it.
And before you go, I just want to say, as I always close, you know what? We may have all started out wrong, but we can all finish strong. And that's what this platform shows, that returning citizens are now finishing strong, and that narrative is changing. AB, go ahead and take us home.
Hey, thanks, Nick, again for coming on board, man, with all this information. We would love to have you back on the show another time, because this right here is very informative. We need this information out there. We got a lot of listeners, a lot of people tune in through Facebook, and we need this information. I know you're working with Julius. Julius, get all that information that you could. I'm in North Carolina, so I got to push that same narrative. I got to push that same information here where I'm at. So we need to work side by side, hand in hand on getting that information, not just in Georgia, but also I need to work with the probation and all the directors here in the state I'm in, or in the city, the county that I'm in. So I appreciate you for coming on board with this information. Julius and Marie, if y'all can hold back, I have something I want to do, like a little brief meeting with you all.
Okay.
So again, thanks, Nick, for coming on board. We had a lovely show. This has been Incarceration to Incorporation. I want to close out, but Julius, if anything else you want to say, Marie, anything else you want to say, or Nick, you want to say anything, Nick, to the people where they can contact you at? You got any information that you want to give as far as your contact information? You on Facebook, Instagram, your email address, or whatever?
Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I'm on the Georgia Department of Community Supervision website. My contact information is on there, so please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, thanks for tuning in. This has been Incarceration to Incorporation. We see y'all again next Friday from 6 to 7. Thanks to All Things Relevant Media, for the opportunity they bring in this platform for us to be able to give y'all the information that y'all need, to the returning citizens, to all the ones who coming home from incarceration, trying to transition back into society. We trying to stop the recidivism rate. If we can do that, if we can get the information to the proper people, I think we can make this happen. We can push forward to it. Again, I see y'all next Friday, 6 to 7.
Appreciate you, Nick. I'll be in contact.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
I think